Hi, my name is Nestor Wagner, and I am going to be teaching this course, the Immigration Training 6 Hours course. My email address is wagner@interpreting.com, and the phone number here is 1-800-625-6222. This course, I will be teaching it all in English, but I will be asking you to refer to your class manual, which you should have downloaded already, so that you can find the translations of many of the things that we will discuss here in class. The course, basically, I will be teaching the explanation of the immigration court, give you some key expressions that come out in immigration court, and there will be some proceedings that you will be interpreting, and many of those things are already translated for you in your class manual. So all you have to do is I will guide you through it. I'll tell you which page to go to, or approximately the heading or the title of that particular practice, and you'll be able then to see the original script and then the corresponding translation of selected terms. There's also a laboratory manual, because this class, as you might or might have not noticed, but this class really comes with two components, the lecture and then the laboratory. The online laboratory has many practices that you should do after completing each lecture. So for example, once we finish this lecture, which is lecture number 1, then I will guide you you will have to go to the laboratory manual, to the online laboratory site. And when you're in that site, you will see several practices that say to be completed after you complete lecture 1 and before you begin lecture 2. In other words, I will give you the instruction and also the guidance as to what practices need to be done in your laboratory. Okay, and before you begin, you continue with the next lecture, which in this case will be lecture 2. You need to have completed all those practices that correspond to what we are going to be discussing today. Okay, so you attend the lecture, then you go to your lab, you do all the lab, make sure that you complete everything as instructed. And then after that is done, then you move on to the next lecture, which in this case, it will be lecture number 2. Now, while you are in lecture number 1, I will be playing practices that you will have to interpret into the target language, into your your first or second language, the other language that you speak besides English. And when you interpret that into the opposite language, it's a good idea for you to record your interpretation. Then I will give you some guidance as to in what section of the class manual you can find the script, as well as the translation of selected terms. Then you will go through it, and then we'll do the practice again, and so on and so forth. Now, let's look a little bit let's look at your class manual. And by now you should have it. If you have not downloaded your class manual, I strongly suggest to pause the video now and to go back, or you can come back to play the video again, but go back to your online lectures, to the lecture site. And there is a button there that says download, I believe, the course syllabus, and also download the class manual. It's all the way in the top. And you have to download it and print it out, okay? Print out your lab manual. Of course, you can also download your course syllabus. Now, today in lecture number 1, we're going to look at some immigration terminology, very common immigration terminology. We're going to look at what a master calendar hearing is. You will be doing 2 cases. You will be interpreting 2 cases that are master calendar hearings, and you will have also the terminology, the most appropriate terms or selected terms from those practices that are already translated into your language. And you will also have your criminal offenses Criminal offenses are there in English as well as in your language, in the target language. So this lecture one really includes some immigration terminology and explanation of what it is, what an immigration court is. And it also includes what's the different type of hearings that we will find in immigration court. Then we will practice those hearings. In this case, it will be the master calendar hearing. You will practice them. You'll practice them twice. The first time without looking at your class manual, and the second time after you complete the first one. When you look at when you're practicing it for the second time, the same practice, then you are I will suggest you to go to your lab manual and to actually follow the script and also the translations provided to you for some selected terms. And we'll do 2 of those cases. We will also be talking today about some interpreting techniques. We'll look at simultaneous technique first and how to work with it. And the other element that it is part of lecture number 1 is what we call the criminal offenses. And criminal offenses are important in immigration court because many of the immigration cases are based on prior criminal convictions. So it's very important that you know how to interpret, for example, what domestic violence means, or what attempted robbery means, or murder or attempted murder, or whatever the case is. So your manual, your class manual, has all that information. All you got to do is go where there's a table of content on page 3 in your class manual that I invite you to look at. And under lecture number 1, which is what corresponds to today, you're going to have the immigration terminology. I will give you explanation of some of these terms, how it actually works, and you'll see your translation, your manual. And then you're going to see the explanation of master calendar hearing. I will explain what it is, and it's also in your manual in English for you to get an idea of what it is in case you want to read it afterwards. And then there are the first proceedings that we will be doing will be the master calendar hearings. And there are 2 cases there as well. And the scripts are there with the corresponding translations, and then the criminal offenses. So what do you need to know before you move on to lecture number 2? Well, you need to know everything that was covered in lecture number 1, everything that is in this class manual under lecture number 1. And most important of all, you should have completed all the laboratory practices that correspond to lecture number 1. And those laboratory practices, you will be able to find them in your online interpreting lab. You have to get out of the video lectures, go to the main page, and then the main page you will find an online interpreting laboratory, online laboratory, and you click there. And when you go there, there are some. First thing you will do is download your laboratory manual, which includes the scripts for every single practice there. And of course, you won't look at the scripts beforehand. I will tell you how this is supposed to be done the proper way, so that you are certain that you know the material and that you can not only interpret that in immigration court, but also have a good opportunity of passing our final examination. So there are 6 lectures like this, and you will see that each lecture I explain certain things, and I'll refer you to the book, and then I'll tell you to go to the lab, to the online lab, and then complete certain practices, and so on and so forth. So that's the sequence. Now, I believe after lecture number 3, you will find in your video lectures a button that asks you to schedule your final examination, because this course comes with a final examination, and that final examination is really the one that will determine if you pass or fail this course. And the final examination is in English, and it's also in your language. So it will have all the different unnecessary components. It's really like being in immigration court. And that final examination, which lasts approximately 50 minutes, you will have to schedule it after you finish lecture number 3. And once you schedule it, usually you have to make sure that you schedule it so that by the time you are taking the final examination, you already completed all 6 lectures here in this training program, and you already practice all the laboratory practices that are required for each of those 6 lectures. The day of the exam, then there will be you will be proctor, and in fact, once you download, once you set up the date and time for the final examination, you can download a candidate's manual where it gives you an idea of what's going to be, what's the format of the final examination. And then the day of the final examination, you will be proctored. It's done online. And also you should have access to a phone. You have to have a computer that has a camera, microphone, okay? You need to be connected to high-speed internet. You need to be next to a phone or have some type of access to a phone, because besides doing this online, we're also having a backup copied through the phone system. So all those requirements actually are enumerated and once you sign up for the final examination, it tells you exactly what you need to have. But the most important thing is connection to the internet with the computer, obviously, a webcam or some type of camera that so we can see you on our end, a microphone, okay, and access to a telephone line. Either it could be a landline, or it could also be a cell. It really does not matter, but it has to be good connection, of course. So once you finish the course, then you take the final examination. If you pass the final exam, there are different options when you take your final exam. If you score between 60 and 69.9, you will be allowed to retake this course and also go back to the lab and do more practices and retake the exam. If you score 70% or better, then you technically pass this training program. And by passing the training program, that gives you the possibility of interpreting in immigration court to do your first hearing, where I believe you will be evaluated, live evaluation, and the evaluator will sort of sign you off or give you the final authorization to continue working in immigration court as an immigration interpreter.